This is all the latest news and gossip.
Don't put it on me, Illinois.
I like this V-neck.
Oh.
What fabric is this?
I don't know the fabric. The name of the brand is Jean Blanc, though. And
White John?
Yeah, John White. That's his name.
White John. John White.
Jean Blanc. So he's leisure wear for the well-made man.
Leisure wear for the well-made man. Hold on one second. I'm multitasking. One second. Okay, so, we all know what's going on. First of all, Blackout Tuesday was a weird concept to me that
From the start.
it was not fleshed out. I mean, naturally, listen, like there's a lot of stuff going on that is happening just on the fly, and people, just folks wanting to make things that are impactful. So in that respect, like I think it comes from the best of intentions, but it gets difficult when you have a lot of folks that are not communicating.
Yeah.
So
and when you have a lot of folks who are reacting to support and be a part, not based on conscious analysis and thought and of themselves and what needs to change and what needs to happen, but just based on I need to be a part in a surface way, I think is part of it. Because it's a very passive way to participate, right? And so it doesn't require any level of personal analysis of behavior, of trend. And I think there's an element at play with everything happening right now that is like this energy of like, okay, well now, all right, what let's do it. Let's fix the thing. Now, let's go. Now that you got me, now I'm showed up. You're right, I was wrong before, but I got you. Let's do it now. And I just don't think that's what is afoot. I think
you better say afoot.
I just think that I think the thing that is afoot is an explosion of consciousness due to a confluence of things. Corona's got us all at home, pent up energy and anger at economic instability and lack of health care, and also a ginning up of social division over the past 3 years. And then you get some kind of like in triplicate, you kind of get the perfect storm of racial abuse caught on camera from every angle. That suddenly people have an energy that can explode, and then you have a feeling of what to do about this. And I think it's about recognizing the moment, and then on a very like broad level, I think Black people, we need to just start thinking about Black people and the work before Black people, and recognizing that work is much broader than today, because it's work that has been built up over many, many years. And it's work that requires all of us. And now that more of us are coming to the fray, it's work that can be engaged in and driven forward. But it's not a thing that we can just do a thing today. And for people outside of the Black community, I think it's really an awakening of, oh, Black people are done waiting for us to welcome them into a thing or give them a thing. And what I think white people need to recognize is it's great that you are recognizing where you've been deficient, or I don't want to say white people, people outside of the Black race, outside of Black people. There's a recognition of a deficiency, and I encourage them all. I encourage you all on your journey. I think what we were saying earlier, I was like, I love white people. Like I've lived and loved amongst them. I know them better than they know themselves. And they're incredible students. And so when
I
they
love
say, huh?
I love individuals.
Well, it's yes, the people who happen to be white. There
Thank-
are folks in there who, but my point is that they're excellent students. So when you turn around and you say, I didn't
But
know
even
what was going on and what can I do? I don't believe you.
I think that hold on, let me get my iPad. Hold on. Like, talk about something. Hold on.
Well, my point to that is like, just as a start, pretend that black people are Jewish. That'll at least get you on the road. That'll get you 75% of the way. I mean, only so far, because y'all don't really fuck with the Jewish people, but so far. But and things are different, but it'll at least get you on the road. You can at least just start to think of black people like they're Jewish, and you'll begin to understand how you need to behave. That's the training wheels. That's the training wheels for folks.
I think that it's important though to delineate the difference between like just the generalization of like white people are great learners as much as and I prefer the concept. I prefer the language of they're great takers.
Yeah.
So I think contextually I want that to be clear because
they're incredible at looking at a thing and taking it and codifying it and mass producing it and monetizing it and then making you grateful for participating in it. They're masterful at it.
Yes, and I think that a lot of folks get into the not all white people when they're like, well, I'm not doing that. And it's like, unless you are consciously working against that or you are consciously distancing yourself from benefiting from that, you still have to acknowledge that you are a part of that system. Right?
Yeah.
So there's so much truth to the concept though of what you're saying, because I think a lot of folks don't even, well, the thing is that they don't even attach the two, right? They're not even attaching the fact that like, well, we exercise this energy in this way, but we don't keep that same energy in this way.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like trying to explain to a drug dealer, like, you have so many transferable skills.
It's like, you, under extraordinary circumstances, you have managed to do a great deal.
Your management skills are incredible. You're running entire blocks. Like,
this isn't easy. I wouldn't do this.
I wouldn't do this. Your courage under fire is impeccable. You're a chemist. You're also incredibly organized. Look at your ledger.
I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. I'm worried about you. The longevity,
hence why I suggest using these skills and transferring them to a place that is more beneficial and has more skill, more ability to have longevity. And when I look at white folks who act like, well, I'm able to do all of this, but like, it's like, okay, so my producer at The Real, one of my producers at The Real, my showrunner at The Real, we were talking when we were doing Ahmaud Arbery, like when we were talking about that story, she was like, okay, so we're gonna talk about this, like, and she was like, but his name, Adrian, say his name, and Adrian was like, Ahmaud Arbery, and she was like, right, yeah, I just can't pronounce his name. And I'm like, you can't pronounce Ahmaud Arbery? First of all, the word Arbery is actually it may not be spelled the same, but it is pronounced the name. It's a study of trees. It's literally like in the English language. So it's not even like it's like some other, and I'm like, you know what's not in the English language? Your last name that has 7 consonants lined up against each other. And yet we are able to pronounce that. So I am.
Well, we gifted. We gifted. We got it. But
it's basically like, you need to learn this now. Ahmaud Arbery. And she was like, Ahmaud Arbery. I'm like, figure it out. But the reason I bring that up is because it is so easy to let themselves off the hook. And I think for a lot of us, we do that in many different ways in our lives, right? It's like, even if we want to talk about like relationships, I think a lot of us let ourselves off the hook with relationships because we don't really put in the energy to learn about how to be in better relationships. Like, we simply just are like, I don't really know. Like, I have trauma and, I'll figure it out. But it's like, well, it's going to take some actual application. There's going to take some actual rigorous study if you want to make this difference. And a lot of us are just like, eh. And what we do though is when we do that, I'm on an IG live. My assistant's like, they're gonna call you right now. I'm on an IG live. I have my iPad go. Try again. And so I think that there's really just taking the concerted effort to say, I need to be more on top of this. And the people who happen to be white that I fuck with are those people who are like, you know what? I've been slipping. Touche. I need to be on top of this. But you were saying something to me that I think is really important when you were saying just about, and I think you said it you said it already, but I would love for you to just reiterate it, just like the importance of this time, and what it means to, because I've seen some people saying in the comments, what it means to galvanize this eruption of consciousness.
Right.
Like, what does that actually mean? Because I know a lot of people are like, okay, well, shit is up, it's popping now, but like, what?
And I get that. Hell, my cousins went out to a protest in Miami, and they told me how it was. They're like, I don't know, it's kind of disheartening. I mean, their cats were out there, but they just really know what they were doing. It was, and I think, you know, that what you're saying, like what's popping. I think it's probably a less tangible answer than people are looking for. But for me, it just means that at this time, what everybody has to do is arc their efforts towards independent economic and political empowerment of Black people and Black communities, and working for the expansion of our collective consciousness towards that end. Like, I think so in everything that every decision you make, every business decision you make, everything you create, every consideration you take, I think has to have those overarching principles at play. Because it's harnessing our consciousness in that way. It's operating with that in mind in every interaction that we do in aggregate that will really begin to exponentially push these things across. And then on more fundamental levels, I mean, look, I'll tell you one thing. I think protest efforts have value, but I think they have limitations. And one thing I would love, I would love for every retired Black military man and woman to roll into the major cities of this country and just start protest training centers and just train people in the ways in nonviolent, organized, targeted, destabilizing protest. And it's like we were saying the other day, if
they have to be violent.
Well, this is what I said nonviolent, organized, destabilizing protest. So what I mean by nonviolent is it's any alterations to the system are specifically strategized, as opposed to they're strategic as opposed to riotous. You see what I'm saying? Like, you know the ends, you know why this was done. And I'm saying from an organizational standpoint, that is what really shows people that there is a power center at work, that they have something to contend with. And also, the more organized protesters are, the easier it will be able to detect who's really protesting and who's just out here as a detractor or as an anarchist that's not focused on the message and the mission of the protesters. But if you have a regular...
For a second, there's people who are on here talking about the protests are going to end and we need leadership. You know, you need to tell us what to do. You need to tell us what to do. And it's like, what I want you all to do is stop saying that first. Stop saying that. First of all, I want us to just listen to each other, because I think a lot of people's idea of leadership is just Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Fannie Lou Hamer and like these, you know, just individuals, people on pillars, and we're in a different time. First of all, everybody in here is a leader, right? Whether it's you're leading in your household or with your friends, or you're just leading yourself. Everybody in here has a certain level of leadership that they have to employ and that they have to take responsibility for without being told what to do. So as we're talking right now, you know, you take what you can, you leave what you can, you fuck with what you fuck with, if you don't fuck with it, you're like, I don't really fuck with that. But for what it's worth, we are in a time right now, we have a couple levels of conversation. We have people who have been actively working towards certain things, and we want to help galvanize folks towards those people. We have also folks who are considering other things like Brandon is doing right now, you know, and letting our brains expand beyond what we've seen into what we could see. And we have people who are obstructionists against those things. Don't be the obstructionist. Don't let cynicism keep you from optimism. Okay? Like, you can be a realist at the same time that you can be like, let's consider. We're considering. Continue. Can you continue to consider, please?
We're considering, and I will say one of the reasons that I consider it and I offer up this point in this manner is because not everybody is going to have the answer. Well, what do we do now? Not everybody, and the idea of just looking for something or someone to follow immediately, I don't think is smart, because like Amanda said, the initial leading comes from here. It is about harnessing these new realizations that you're having about your world and the systems and constructs around them and how they move and how you can move within them. And so you yourself, if you start thinking in the way we describe, you know, community empowerment, you know, obviously we're not a monolith, but we need to start to operate far more as a unit to achieve our goals. Then you will begin to find the things that will take you to who your leader needs to be for the place you're in, where you're at. It will lead you to the information that you need to start to communicate to others to build the organization that you need to do the things. But it begins with this. And if this locks in, then you will start to find the more organized mechanisms. That's my thinking.
And I think language is important. Like the words leader, like leader to me just sometimes becomes a bit like overused. Like we need organizers, you know, we need the person who, you know, is at the helm. But sometimes I think the word leader gets misused because people look at it as like, I don't got to do anything but be told. And until I'm told, I don't know what to do.
Right.
And I think it's like, I get a little like miffed, you know, verklempt about that word, because I really do believe that one of the tricks has been making people feel like they cannot lead, you know, and making people feel there's a leader. You need to just take the shit.
Removing power from you, and also responsibility. It's one of the reasons why I think a lot of religious philosophies can be detrimental to our progress as a people. By seeing your savior outside of yourself, it limits your ability to transfer power to yourself and to the people around you, and to exercise that power and to take responsibility for your circumstances as well. When we look at the challenges that we face, there are things that have been inflicted upon us, and there are circumstances that we also created within our own communities that made us susceptible to disruption. And so we have to look at both of those things, and in looking forward, we have to recognize that there is a power within ourselves. There's nobody. People have been passing this quote around. There's nobody coming to save us.
I've been saying that forever.
I probably saw it on your page.
So this is my thing. Like I feel like people are like, you know, what are the steps? What are the steps? And it's like, the first step is literally just getting on the same page that we need steps.
Yeah.
So I think it's a beautiful thing to see folks saying like, what are the steps, right? Because I think there's a lot of folks that weren't asking that question. And I think what's happening right now is that me and Brandon were just talking earlier today, and I wanted him to come on here so that he could speak to what he was saying about one specific step, right? Which is a way that you can, from today, change how you think about your work, right? Change how you think about your place in all of this, even if you're not at the front line of a protest, or if you're not in a basement meeting about organizing. Like, what is like an actualized way? And he said it before, and I want him to say it again, in terms of the shifting of consciousness, and how that first is this is one of the first steps that you can take to all these things we're talking about. And then I'll explain why I'm saying that.
Yeah, it's all about perspective. You know, it's how we see ourselves. That Ivan Van Sertima talks about it all the time. He's a well-known anthropologist, but how we see ourselves affects how we treat ourselves, how we allow ourselves to be treated, how we see others, how we allow others to treat us. And what we're seeing right now is an awareness coming up amongst a lot of people. And the most important thing, you know, look, we are the majority people on this planet. You know, they call us a minority all the time. We're the majority people on this planet. We have oftentimes outnumbered. We have always been capable of overpowering our chains. We have always been capable, but we have to find the catalytic transfer of consciousness to allow us to recognize what our chains are so we can remove them. And so right now, for everybody who's looking for a thing to do, what I'm saying is that it's about thinking about every move you make and arcing it towards independent economic and political power for Black people and Black communities.
So can you give an example of what that would be in practicum? Like, I'm an accountant. What's an example of how me as an accountant, how I can apply the thinking that you're talking about?
It would be either building up your accounting firm and networking with your fellow young entrepreneurial Black accountants so that in your 5th year, you all can pull your resources together and start your own accounting firm. So you all own that. You all pass the language of that on to your children. You move into neighborhoods with other individuals who represent that same philosophy. You start businesses with other individuals who maintains that same philosophy. My brother opened a Chelsea Piers in DC. And now that he has that, as he looks towards his other businesses, he looks to go back to the other individuals who didn't invest with him the first time around. But instead of being upset with them and not offering them the next opportunities, he recognizes the need to cultivate within his community that when your community members come to you to pull together, to build businesses, to do things, take the opportunity, do it. Those are the kinds of things you do. And politically, we have to start to think specifically about, like, if you think about police reform, if we want to do anything about police reform, that happens in your local municipalities. That's your local district attorneys, your local prosecutors, your local elected officials are the only ones who have any real effect on that. And so that is where you have to begin to focus your attention. You know, Yellow Pain has a great song where he breaks this thing down, like, just quite fantastically in a very accessible way.
Quite fantastically.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary. But that is where things need to begin to focus, and you need to kind of, it's the so that's an example of a political.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you to give me another example. So now the first example was someone who's an accountant, and you know, so they have the skill set in that way. Let's say, and they're able to be a small business owner. Let's say you are a 20-year-old college student and you work at the Gap.
Mm-hmm.
How does that person apply what you're talking about in terms of the consciousness of moving towards political and economic independence? How does that person apply that to their daily moves from this point forward?
I mean, you could do it in a number of ways, but
actually, let's take out, they're not a college student. They're in retail at the Gap. They work check to check. How does that person apply?
Well, for me, that person, first of all, because part of this is education. So you're reading about things, but just a very practical way to do that. It's the same kind of construct that a lot of immigrant families use when they came to this country, and that, like, a lot of Asian American families do to this day, Middle Eastern families, you know, group banking. You can get together with a group of friends, and every month you all are going to put a certain amount into this pot, and one person gets to take that total pot for that month. And over the course of time,
you know, that's a real West Indian thing. You know, West Indians been doing that forever. We call it a susu. We call it a box. What else do we call it, fam? A susu, but Guyanese call it a box, I think. What do Haitians call it? I don't know what the Haitians make. My mom would know. Carry on.
But it's like we could do things like that. It's like and you do that with the group, and then you buy a property, and then you buy the next property for the next person, and then you guys you have a block, and so there are many ways to start, but there's so many different ways to do it. But if you're starting to think that, all right, I need to make sure that I insulate my own infrastructure within my family, within my community, then you're starting to think about where you're going to do business. I'm going to put my money in Black banks. All right, I'm going to make the extra effort to invest in those things so that the money that I generate can go into my community, can go into my schools, so that when there is a fracture in my community, that the buttresses of the mentality of the community as a whole can support that fracture. Because that's how you build generational wealth. That's how you build.
But I think that's the key thing that I'm hearing from you, whether it's the accountant that has a firm, or it's the check to check, working at the Gap, it becomes this concept of strategy.
Chance the Rapper, Amanda Seals, self-creating content, putting out a message that is about consciousness in your behavior and how you move, standing up for your brothers and your sisters in every instance possible, not fearing the repercussions of doing so, because you know the more that you're fighting for each other, the less you have to fight for yourself. These are the kinds of principles that I think that you can apply, but again, the hostilities become endless when you begin to operate in that manner,
I think that's what, that honestly, like, as we sit here, I know a lot of people are like, what are the actions we can take? What are the things we can do? What are the things we can do? And I think a lot of folks don't consider, well, one, Brandon just named a lot of just like ground floor actions, right? I just always end up coming back to like your mentality and the shifting in your mentality. And like, I can speak for myself in that, like, I've just had times in my life where I had to completely shift my mentality in order to step myself into the space of change and being a change agent and being receptive, et cetera, et cetera. And so many of us are ready to move right now on what someone else is telling us, but we really need to cultivate simultaneously what our own intuition and our heart tells us. And a lot of us really just haven't been able to do that work for a various amount of reasons, right? Like, some of us are just trying to survive. Like, some of us are just, you know, we're on a mission and we don't feel like we have that time. But I feel like so much of my energy in what's going on right now feels like it's being pulled into just trying to be a part of helping to shape our minds to be able to properly apply the physical actions that create this economic wealth, that create this independence, etc. Because a lot of us don't even feel empowered enough to be independent, right? So like, I know, like, there's just this, like, one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is, like, we talk about our ancestors all the time. We talk about our ancestors all the time. We talk about, you know, we need to connect with our ancestors. You know, we thank our ancestors. We are not our ancestors. People talk about this all the time, but we don't conceptualize the fact that we are somebody else's ancestors. We don't move in that way. We move as if the story ends with us.
Right.
And it does. We are a continuance of a story that has started before us, long before us, and we are continuance of that. And there's a certain level of consciousness that we have to really start to consider in the fact that not only are we continuing their work and we are the product of it, but we are also the continuance of that to other folks. And I feel like there's something in you that when you're conscious of that, changes how you move, because you know that there's other folks that are going to rely on you, right?
Yeah.
And there's a future ahead, and I want us to start just meditating on that thought, like, what ancestor do I want to be to someone else?
Right. I think there's a gap there for us, because a lot of us do talk about our ancestors, but not that many of us can actually clearly see that thread. Like, it's very conceptual for a lot of people, as opposed to a tangible, because a lot of people feel there's a break in their ancestry line. Like, so you don't feel rooted. You don't know your history. You don't feel like you have a past, and you see what your present is like. You've been told what the value of your life is like, and you see it. So you don't really think you have a future. That's why I'm willing to go after it over a puma. Like, you know, there's a fatalist mentality. You're right. I don't see the future. I'm not planning on being anybody's ancestor. I'm not thinking that way.
No.
And part of that is also the immediacy of kind of the commercialized consumptive culture that we have. But you're right. It's starting to, one, connect to a legacy that does exist, and recognizing that there is a legacy that continues, and that, particularly as the original indigenous autochthonous people of this planet.
What was that word?
Autochthonous.
Autochthonous?
Yeah, autochthonous.
Spell that. What the fuck word is that?
Autochthonous.
Autochthonous.
A talk. LC.
Autochthonous.
Yeah.
Hold up. New word alert. Autochthonous. A-U-T. You'll be reading books. Yes, you do.
I do be
You'll
reading.
be reading books. A-U-T-O-C-H-T-H-O.
ONOUS.
N-O-U-S. In ancient Greece, the concept of autochthonies means the original inhabitants of a country, as opposed to settlers and those of their descendants who kept themselves free from an admixture of foreign peoples. In mythology, autochthonies are those mortals who have sprung from the soil, rocks, and trees. Autochthonies.
Yes.
If I ever have a child, that's the middle name.
Autochthonies?
Yes, just in case he or she decides to be a rapper. If niggas can be called baby and little baby and baby baby, like autochthonies, come on, man. Autochthonies? Wow.
Though that definition, because I never read like a Greek rooted definition of it. I was just like, just native people.
But I love the concept of that in Greek mythology. Autochthonies are those mortals who have sprung from the soil, rocks, and trees.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
carry on. Autochthonies, y'all. We just learned a whole new word. Autochthonies. Autochthonous. A-U-T-O-C-H-T-H-O-N-O-U-S. That makes
Well,
it gonna be crazy.
but all I was saying is that as the original people of indigenous and autochthonous descent of every landmass on this planet, it is our responsibility to awaken and reassert, take responsibility of the planet and reassert control over the narrative of living beings on this planet. The continuing under the Western construct of white supremacist consumptive destruction of living things, the exploitation of living things is killing everything on the planet, and it is our responsibility as custodians of the planet to restore things. But we do that by focusing.
It's very Wakandian. Like there's a certain Wakandishness that was in that film that I think people thought was just kind of like, we're watching a movie about a comic book story, but there is something in that concept of like, being of the earth, and thus you must protect the earth. Period. Like vibraniums of the earth, we come from this, we got to protect it. End of story. Without
us, there is no planet, which is part of the problem. The distress the planet has been suffering over the past 500 years is the distress that we have been struggling the last 500, 600 years. It goes hand in hand.
So I challenge folks who are here asking like, okay, what is the next step? I will tell you first and foremost, I am not an organizer. So I don't have the next step to defunding the police. I don't have the next step to, necessarily like get like, well, voting is the next step in like literally just being a part of the conversation.
The next step
that's a very basic.
That's the
basic step. Voting is a basic step. But I think we have to acknowledge that there's a number of steps that need to happen simultaneously, right?
Yes.
So voting is one of those steps, right? Being vocal about what's going on right now in spaces that you may never have been before is also a very valuable and viable step, right? Because
absolutely,
there has to be the new normal needs to be not having to make people feel polite about their oppressive ways. Like,
not stepping around it, not for fear of loss of this or retribution. It's like, now again, I'm always one of these people, like, if I know what my end goal is, I'm gonna move with the best strategy to achieve that. So maybe that means I'm not gonna burn this room down today, so that I can burn the building down tomorrow. But but
you got to start moving shit out little by little.
And no matter what I do, I'm moving in that direction. It's like, I'm that's what I'm at. If I'm gonna make my move to the side door to take it up, that's fine. But I'm moving in this direction. I'm not standing still, and I'm not acknowledging what's going on here.
So someone asked, like, what about your job? And I think that really becomes you know your job better than anybody else. But what Brandon was talking about earlier is that your consciousness, when you change your consciousness, it shifts what you base your ambitions on. It shifts how you move. It shifts what you attach yourself to. Oftentimes, it also shifts what you let stress you out. And what I think a lot of folks come to realize, that a lot of our power gets taken from us simply because we don't necessarily know how to, we don't trust that our power can work, especially if we work together. And that's frustrated me in a number of spaces, right? Like just feeling like, damn, if all of us banded together, we would be so much more powerful than this structure right here. But because we're not, they're able to make us all feel like we need to just stay at our cubicles and shut up. Because
we learned our lessons very well. We've learned
yeah.
our lessons. They did that.
You know, but that consciousness, even in a basic way, it's like, all right, you're at your job and you definitely know, like, my bosses are racist as shit and I can't be in here, you know, moving and grooving the way I want to. But you start creating outlets for yourself to do that. And the more that you create those outlets for yourself, the more you are going to build up that confidence that enforces you to find other spaces or create your own spaces to do that, instead of giving your talents to a racist person that is giving you money. You know,
Yeah.
and the goal for all of us is to be able to get our livelihood and functionality from sources that are not oppressing us at the same time. That is the goal. That's the economic independence that Brandon is speaking about. Right?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Do you want to be Barry Gordy? That's
But
what
not everybody is Barry Gordy.
No. But it's.
But you want to at least be able to work for a space and within a space that is not simultaneously discriminating against you as it takes from your resources.
And the thing is,
you don't want to be your personal Africa to these fucking racist fucks.
Right.
Like, people like, folks don't understand that they went to Africa, and people know about, like, okay, they took slaves from Africa. What a lot of people don't know is that beyond slaves that they took from Africa, they literally ruined the fucking soil. They took crops that had no business growing in Africa and brought them crops like the white bean. And they decided, you know what, we're going to grow the white bean over here. And they didn't give a fuck about the fact that the white bean in that particular soil took the nutrients out of the soil. And so it made the soil no longer useful to be able to grow the crops that those people were living on for centuries.
Created a greater mass exodus of these people, which made them far more disparate, which made them easier to pick off and colonialize and take control of their economic resources, which they have to this day.
So,
an element about
all of us autochthonouses.
An element about consciousness that, you know, what about my job? When we expand as people, our relationships change. Our jobs change. We decide we are no longer willing to deal with X, Y, and Z. I love this person, but I'm not going to live like this anymore. You know what? I need to work, but
look at Maite. Hola, Maitota. Okay, go on.
Yeah, like I work here, but I can no longer make these kinds of decisions. This compromises me too much. I have a buddy who's a prison guard, and he was just like, I couldn't do it after a certain point, man. Like, obviously I wasn't there because I had all the choices in the world, but at a certain point, I can't live like this. So,
well, you know what happened to me today?
Yes, she has arrived.
I've arrived because my contract is up at the Real, and I did not renew it, because it doesn't feel good to my soul to be at a place where I cannot speak to my people the way they need to be spoken to, and where the people who are speaking to me in disparaging ways are not being handled.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in a space where I can, as a full Black woman, have my voice, and my coworkers also have their voices, and where the people at the top are not respecting the necessity for Black voices to be at the top too. So, you know, you reach a point, like, even when it just comes to Hollywood in general, you've seen me transform into a way that I just can't function in this place the same way. I can't. They planting white beans in my soil.
And the thing is, for me, it becomes a point where it's not worth it. Like, there are there are roles that you cannot accept because of how a character is being portrayed, or because the narrative that's going to be told is not going to be entirely true. So how will it portray my people? What will it represent? What images am I putting out? A thing that we fail to really focus on, and I was talking to Thomas about this, is that the way our image is projected, we have no control over our image in media, in news, and that is what controls how everybody sees us. The majority of the people in the Midwest and these rednecks or whatever, they ain't never spent no time around no black people, but constantly pumped into their brain is a message about how these people lack worth and how they're violent and how you need to be afraid of these people. And it's an element that is if we want to really make a change, we have to assert control over our narrative in media and in entertainment. So that means we have to start making projects a certain kind of way. It means even when we want to tell our stories, we can't tell them through the same lens that they want to see. You know, it's like I can tell you a great story, but it doesn't have to be a slave narrative anymore. It doesn't have to be couched through the same lens that you're willing to let me make movies through. I don't gotta be a gangster. I don't gotta be shooting police. I don't gotta be. There are other ways for me to explore the nuances of my experience. You know, and but for us, we have to do that. Otherwise, what was it she just said? Is like, yeah, the first thing any conqueror does when they go into a place is they take control of the radio stations. They take control of the TV stations. They assert
Yes.
their will and their ideology on a people.
Listen, media is king. Media is king. That's why, like, spaces like the Shade Room and, you know, and Gossip and Baller Alert, like, I know that there's a certain levity that is enjoyed in those spaces, but I really do get concerned about how they are detrimental in conditioning us to publicly disparage each other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when we look at other groups that don't do that, we have to be conceptually not necessarily saying like we need to be like them, but I think the best idea wins, and we have to be able to look at other folks and say like, well, they may be trash, but they got that right.
They got that right. 60s, 70s, 80s. All our black music was about love. It was about relationships, about black empowerment. And then when you come out in the hip hop, we're talking about a black consciousness, black power, and then you get an infiltration of music and a commercialization of music, and then suddenly the most influential thing for black people is music. And so then suddenly
1000%.
our messages are the degradation of our people and our neighborhoods, the degradation of our greatest asset, black women, the devaluation of black women, of black families, of black life, the commercialization and the exploitation of black culture, and it creates a hollowing. But at the same time, it draws you further into the successful construct of white supremacy, which once you get there, it makes it harder for you to make a change, to become aware, because you know you're used
it's
to.
all encompassing.
Yeah, I got the fame now. I got money. Why would I turn this away? Like, why? This is good. It's great. It's good to be king. It's good to be king.
People are like, Amanda, you need your own show. I want a show called The Big Seals. That's what, if I'm gonna do a show, it's just gonna be called The Big Seals, and I'm gonna be talking my shit, and I'm gonna have my characters, and then Brandon gonna come on.
My characters. I'm gonna have my characters.
My characters. You know, like, and it's really gonna be rooted in the awareness of my autochthonous being and understanding that, you know, one thing I love about Brandon and one thing that has kept us bonded, like Brandon and I have been bonded since 1998. Like January 5th, 1999. That's when we met. We met January 5th, 1999, and we have been tight ever since. And I think on a basic level, it's because we both come from the same mindset of like, whenever we create as artists, it comes from two basic bottom lines, and needs to serve our creative hearts as well as give the people social change. It needs to meet those two standards on a basic level. And I think for a lot of folks listening and watching, it's like, look at what you do in your life. And you do need to identify, like, what are your tent poles that you make moves on? Because I know a lot of us do shit just for bread.
Yeah.
And there is a luxury in not having to do shit just for bread. That is a full fact. Like, I am so... I have gratitude every morning. I wake up with gratitude every morning that I found myself I've created a life for myself where I don't have to do things just for money, where I can be like, y'all can keep that, fuck out of here. But I think a lot of that has also come from like my own confidence that like I'll find the bread in a manner that serves me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I agree. Again, it is a luxury, but it does also require a conscious structuring
Morals.
of things so that, okay, I'm gonna live like this so that I don't have to be chained to the bread. You know, that's why I don't got no kids. That's why I don't have, you know. But it's like you make your
I don't have kids because I haven't met a nigga that I can have kids with yet. But
yeah.
that's another
I'll admit it's probably more complicated.
episode.
Probably a bit more complicated than that. I'll grant.
Maybe that's why I'm still single.
But it's
I do like to think though that my egg count is aging like I'm aging.
it's robust.
I do like to think that. Like, well, if I'm still giving a youthful vibe, maybe my ovaries is still also giving a youthful vibe.
I think I feel like that's a way to rock. You know, again, thoughts can have an effect on the body. The more you project that south, you know,
right, like to that region.
Then
I know people are like, why don't you just go find out about your eggs? Don't come for my neck right now. All right.
Because they shut down all medical services while we deal with COVID and let
I feel attacked.
die.
I feel attacked. You know, but listen, like there really is no today answer for all the tomorrows.
There isn't. But as an aside, just to speak to this election, because
yes, please.
This is my philosophy. Obviously, Sleepy Joe Biden is a weak candidate, but for me, and we need to push him. But for me, if I'm just thinking practically, for the goals I have for my life and the values of the people and the communities I care about, voting for Biden and the Democrats in this election will put me into a greater playing field to achieve the things that I want for myself and my people.
Yes. Now, that's one sentence. What is the next sentence?
The next sentence is in approaching that goal, ensuring that I build up enough of an organized coalition to put pressure on this person so that once we have gotten over that hump, that person can be driven and influenced in the directions that we need to continue to create a landscape that can further our goals. But it doesn't mean that I love everything the Democrats do. I worship Joe Biden. I'm in agreement with every no. I'm gonna put ourselves and our people in a greater position to live, and part of that is holding their feet to the fire.
Yes, I do think though that there is value in the conversation of pushing them at present to create a more robust presentation.
Yes.
That will garner more support in achieving the goal of getting this motherfucker out of office.
Absolutely. And to that point, because if that is my goal, I need you all to do this well enough to convince the other cats who aren't thinking like me.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Because I know what my crew's gonna do. I need you all to rock hard enough that these cats will come through.
Because you know what I don't feel like a lot of people understand is that we're balanced. The biggest challenge and what we're talking to a lot of here in this conversation is challenging apathy. Right? Challenging apathy and nihilism. Like the apathy is the not caring, and the nihilism is like is really honestly even deeper than that, and just feeling like my life doesn't matter and it's going to end anyway, so I might as well be in charge of ending it. Like it, like there's like it's deep in our streets. I have to
these things so don't matter, and these people aren't
so bad. Talk amongst yourselves. What are the Kardashians saying? Because I haven't heard much.
Right. It's also, you know, what's going on and how are we going to deal with these things. So Joe Biden, I'm going to look at some of these comments. Joe Biden needs some blacks to whisper in his ear. Joe Biden really does need some blacks to whisper in his ear. It's just like, but you know what he did? By having that gaffe on the show with Charlemagne the other day, he made it absolutely imperative that he chooses a black female vice president. He was trying to get out of it. And it's impossible for him not to do that anymore. He has to choose a black female vice president. Otherwise, he just don't want to win. And sometimes I feel like the Democrats don't want to win. But I feel like we have to ride them to We have to ride them to our greatest advantage. But deciding that we're going to vote for them and that is to to our greatest ends does not mean not being critical of them and not demanding that they put forth the greatest campaign possible and the greatest message for the Black community possible. Because again, it's about pulling out the cast that you lost a long time ago, because you all always front the Democrats.
I see someone saying that Joe has personally been in the streets in Wilmington, Delaware.
Yeah, Joe stopped out. He stepped out yesterday. He was out of town. He was at I think a church. You know, I saw somebody speaking, and he spoke to some people. You know,
was that before or after he said shoot people in the leg instead of the heart?
Before, I think.
Okay.
It was before.
Okay.
Again, Joe, but Barack and Michelle gonna ride him. They gonna ride him like Zorro. He gonna ride him like Zorro till he show them the money.
Someone said, "Let me get a pineapple bear." There you go.
Oh, word. Gummy bears bouncing here and there and everywhere. High adventures are beyond compare.
They are the gummy bears.
Dashing and daring, courageous and caring, faithful and friendly with stories to share. Throughout the forest they sing out in chorus, marching along as their song fills the air. Gummy bears bouncing here and there everywhere. High adventures are beyond compare. They are the gummy bears. They are the gummy bears.
90s children, 80s babies, 90s children.
And on that note.
What'd you say?
I said, and on that note.
Listen. So I guess my final thing, because we've been on for an hour and I know we both have shit to do, but my final sentiment, especially as it relates to voting and Biden and all of that, is, well, actually in regard to the police, like, I see a lot of people posting like pictures of the police kneeling, and they're like, this is what it should be like. And it's like, I don't need the police to kneel with me. Because
I need them to pull their fellow officers off of my dying brothers and sisters. I need them to be in the streets as legions marching against other police.
I need them in their uniform marching with us.
Now, some of them have done that. I
haven't seen that.
Flint, the sheriff in Flint did that. He rolled out, he had his whole crew take off their body armor, their batons. He said, look, I hear you. We're just here to make sure that you all are okay. We're going to march with y'all. We're going to walk with y'all. I was like, okay.
Well, my homegirl brought to my attention today. She was like, their job for the most part up until this point has always been to like protest. I mean, to just protect us as the protesters, right? Like that's what it's supposed to be. But this is the first time in a real big way that they're the ones we're protesting. We're protesting them. So they're taking it to a whole nother level of personal, because they are the ones we are actually protesting. And we're not protesting COVID. We're protesting you motherfuckers.
And they've been given permission because that dude stepped out there and he said, ride. He said, ride on him. When I was watching that speech, I went out last week. I didn't go out this week, and I wasn't thinking that I was necessarily going to go out again, but you're making me feel like I need to ride. Like, you're making me want to ride this incendiary ass speech that you just gave.
Listen, your mans said insurrection. What? First of all, any of my Star Trek people on here, my Trekkies, know that when we talk about insurrection, we talk about the Borg.
It's
okay,
real.
That's
the realest thing in the universe. That's the realest thing they ever wrote.
Thank you. And that's what they really are trying to do. They want us all to be 7 of 9.
He said, I protect peaceful protesters and your Second Amendment rights. Who are you talking to? Okay.
But I'll tell you what, since we're going to keep with this Star Trek metaphor, resistance is not futile. As we learned when we saw how the Borg eventually got shut the fuck down.
Yo, Picard don't never give it up.
Ever. So shout out to all my
man's looked 65 since the 70s.
What'd you say?
Man's looked 65 since the 70s.
Consistent. He's like Ice-T. He was old before he was young. Ice-T been old when he was young, and now that he's old, he look young.
He look young.
You know, I just want us all to conceptualize in a real way the ways in which what's going on now trigger things in us. I don't want to say trigger. They fire off pistons. You know, we got to get our flux capacitors working. Like and what I don't want people to do is be disillusioned with this concept of like, well, you know, but it's just happening now and it's going to stop. It doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to. And the protesting may stop on the streets, but protesting exists in many other ways. And it doesn't necessarily only exist on the streets. What happens with protesting is it becomes,
only exist on the streets.
It can't sustain. What ends up happening is it gets organized. And those protests turn into progress because they are plans. And that's really what we're saying when we talk about like, get your mental right, because this requires stamina. It requires stamina. And when Brandon says like, okay, I don't really like Biden, but I think he's the best option for us to move into this next space. Fair. You know, when I say like, okay, we need to consider like there's different factions at work that have been at work. What speaks to your passion?
Right.
You know, maybe you don't give a fuck about defunding the police, but you're like, well, we got to get on this voting right now. Focus your energies over there. Figure out how to be a part of it. Absolutely. So tomorrow we're going to have anyone who listens to my podcast, Small Doses. We are going to have the first Small Doses forum. So I've been wanting to do this for a long time in the real world, but now we're just on these internets. And so Small Doses forum is basically going to be, we're going to do side effects of uprising, and we're going to source our questions from. We're going to source our questions from the SFB Society, which is my new app we launched yesterday. That is a safe space for Black voices to be their whole Black selves. And, you know, we're going to answer those questions to those people. And we're going to do that in party of folks being able to watch and join and take away from it where they want. And I think the goal in our question selection is going to be, you know, really being able to answer questions that we feel like speak to a large amount of people and relate to a large amount of people. So for more information on that, you can, I'm going to post it to my Instagram. We're also going to post it to the Smart Money and Black Instagram. It'll also be in my IG stories. But this is going to go down tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. So you'll be able to join on YouTube. So we'll be able to have as many people viewing as possible. So you'll be able to join on YouTube. You'll have an email. You'll have a sign in, and people will be able to join us. And that's how it's going to go.
Word. Congratulations. Keep doing the work. Keep doing the work. Fertilizing the minds and cultivating the people.
Say that one more time.
Fertilizing the minds, cultivating the minds of the people.
I just want to say how proud of folks, though, because I am really proud of folks. I think a lot of people may have felt for a long time like they just didn't know how to say it, but in this moment, they have challenged themselves to speak in ways that they let themselves off the hook before. Yeah. And I think that's super duper dope. And I always say venture to impress yourself. So for what it's worth, y'all are impressing me.
That's dope. I like that.
I'm going to put it on the shirt.
Venture to impress yourself.
Venture to impress yourself. A lot of people are afraid of, like, you know, trying because they're just like, oh, I might fail. Or you might be like, yeah, I'm out here.
And either way, homie, the beauty is in the endeavor.
Someone asked that I get fired from the Real. I don't get fired from places. I leave.
She's like a tree that way.
And that's that. There's nothing else to say. I love you. I love you. I love you, Brandon. I love you.
I love you too, though.
I love y'all. Thank you so much. And we appreciate you. Everybody, just remember, we are each other's business. When we look out for each other, we lift each other up. Stay strong, stay safe. And if it applies to you, stay Black.
Peace, love, and soul, y'all.